I stare at the empty corner where my Steinway baby grand piano used to sit, and I can't breathe because tomorrow is my Juilliard audition, the audition I've been preparing for my entire life since I was 4 years old and first touched ivory keys. And my parents sold my piano yesterday to buy Stephanie a Mercedes class because she said she needed reliable transportation for her new job at the boutique. And when I begged them to wait just 2 days until after my audition, they looked at me like I was being selfish and unreasonable, and Dad said, "Melody, you can practice at the community center. This is about Stephanie's future and stability. You need to think about someone other than yourself for once." The silence in our house feels like death, like the absence of everything I've ever loved, because for 15 years that piano was my voice, my heart, my entire world, and now there's just empty space and the faint outline on the hardwood floor where the legs used to rest, and I keep walking to that corner expecting to see it there, expecting to run my fingers across the keys and lose myself in Chopin or Debussy or my own compositions that nobody else has ever heard because I was always too afraid to share them, too afraid that if I reached for something beyond what my family expected, they would find another reason to take it away from me. This is the second time they've done this to me, the second time they've sold my piano for Stephanie's car troubles, and I should have learned my lesson when I was 16 and they sold my upright piano to pay for her car insurance after she crashed Dad's sedan into a telephone pole because she was texting while driving, but I told myself that was different, that was an emergency, that families help each other, and I needed to be understanding because Stephanie came from such a difficult background and she needed our support more than I needed my music, and I spent 2 years rebuilding my foundation, relearning pieces on the community center's old spinet that was missing 3 keys and had sticky pedals, working twice as hard to prepare for this moment that was supposed to change everything. "Melody, stop being dramatic," Mom says as she walks past the empty corner without even glancing at it, carrying Stephanie's dry cleaning because Stephanie mentioned she was too busy with her new job to pick it up herself, and I want to scream that this isn't dramatic. This is the destruction of everything I've worked for, but I know that if I say anything, they'll tell me I'm being unreasonable again, that I'm putting my selfish desires above family loyalty, that Stephanie has suffered enough in her life without having to deal with my attitude on top of everything else. I remember when Stephanie first came to live with us 7 years ago after her grandmother died, how I was excited to have a sister, how I shared everything with her, my room, my books, even my piano practice time because Mom said we needed to help Stephanie feel like she belonged, and I wanted to be a good big sister. I wanted her to love our family as much as I did. But somewhere along the way, everything shifted, and I became the outsider in my own home, the one who was asking for too much, expecting too much, taking up too much space with my dreams and my music, and my desperate need for my parents to see me, really see me, the way they saw her. Tomorrow I have to walk into that Juilliard audition room and play Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, the piece I've been perfecting for 3 years, the piece that showcases every technique I've mastered, every emotion I've learned to channel through my fingers. And I haven't been able to practice it on my own piano for 3 days because they needed the money right away, because Stephanie's financing fell through at the last minute and she couldn't wait even a week for me to complete the most important audition of my life. And when I tried to explain how crucial this was, how Juilliard only accepts 20 pianists per year out of thousands of applicants, Dad just shook his head and said, "There will be other opportunities, Melody, but Stephanie needs this car to get to work. This is about practical reality, not childhood fantasies." The worst part is that I know exactly why this happened, why Stephanie suddenly needed a new car right before my audition, why her financing mysteriously fell through at the exact moment when selling my piano would cause maximum damage, because she's been watching me prepare for months, listening to me practice the same passages over and over, seeing the acceptance letters from other conservatories that came as backup plans, and she couldn't stand the thought of me leaving, of me succeeding, or of me finally proving that my dreams weren't just childish fantasies, but real possibilities that could take me away from this house where everything revolves around her needs and her feelings and her carefully crafted image as the grateful adopted daughter who deserves everything I've ever wanted. I should have seen it coming because the pattern has been building for years, each sacrifice getting bigger and more devastating, each time my parents asking me to understand, to be mature, to put family first, and each time I gave in because I thought that if I could just prove how selfless I was, how much I loved them, they would finally see me as worthy of their protection instead of their disappointment. When I was 14 and Mom said we had to cut back on my piano lessons because Stephanie needed counseling for her adjustment issues, I told myself it was temporary, that family comes first, and I practiced twice as hard during my remaining lessons to make up for it, spending hours at the school piano after classes ended, staying until the janitor had to kick me out because Mr. Peterson had already gone home and I was the last person in the building. My fingers cramped and my back aching from the old bench that was too low. But I didn't complain because I understood that Stephanie's mental health was more important than my musical education, that a good sister would sacrifice for someone who had already lost so much in her young life. But then the counseling sessions stretched from 6 months to a year, and suddenly Stephanie needed special tutoring because her grades were suffering from her emotional trauma, and my piano lessons went from twice a week to once every 2 weeks. And when I asked if we could find a less expensive teacher or if I could do extra chores to earn the lesson money myself, Dad looked at me with such disappointment and said, "Melody, I thought you were more mature than this. Stephanie has been through things you can't even imagine. And here you are worried about piano lessons when your sister is struggling just to feel safe in our home." The word sister always came with extra emphasis when they talked about Stephanie, as if they needed to remind me that she belonged here. That questioning her needs was the same as rejecting the entire concept of family, and I internalized that message so completely that I started feeling guilty for even wanting things for myself, for dreaming about conservatory or imagining a life where music was my career instead of just a hobby that I was lucky to have at all. When I was 16 and they sold my upright piano to pay for Stephanie's car insurance after she crashed Dad's car, I cried in the music room at school until Mr. Peterson found me and asked what was wrong, and when I tried to explain, he looked so shocked that I immediately felt embarrassed, like I was making too big a deal out of something that normal families probably dealt with all the time. But he said, "Melody, that piano was your instrument, your connection to music. They can't just take that away from you." And I had to explain that it wasn't being taken away, it was being sacrificed for something more important. That Stephanie needed transportation to get to her job at the mall, that insurance was mandatory and we didn't have any other way to pay for it after the accident. Mr. Peterson was quiet for a long time, and then he said I could practice in the music room after hours, that he would give me the key and I could come in whenever I needed to. And I was so grateful that I cried again because finally someone understood that I needed to play, that music wasn't just something I enjoyed but something I required to breathe, to think, to exist in the world without falling apart completely. And for 2 years, I rebuilt my foundation on that school piano, learning to adjust to its slightly different touch, its temperamental middle C that sometimes stuck, its pedals that squeaked when the humidity was too high. I thought that was rock bottom, that surely my parents would never ask me to sacrifice anything that important again, but I was wrong because yesterday when Stephanie came home crying about her car troubles, saying that her financing had fallen through and she might lose her job if she couldn't get reliable transportation, the first thing Dad said was, "Well, we could sell Melody's piano. That would give us enough for a decent down payment." And when I started to protest, he held up his hand and said, "Before you say anything, think about what's really important here. Stephanie has finally found a good job. She's building her life, and you can practice somewhere else for a few weeks until we get back on our feet financially." A few weeks, as if my Juilliard audition was just some casual recital that could be rescheduled, as if 3 years of preparation could be adjusted for their convenience, as if the most important day of my musical life was less significant than Stephanie's need for a Mercedes instead of a Honda, because of course it couldn't just be any car. It had to be something that would make her feel successful, something that would prove to her coworkers and friends that she came from the kind of family that could afford luxury, that she deserved better than the used cars and hand-me-downs that most 19-year-olds start with. And the terrible part is that I know my parents genuinely believe they're being fair, that they're teaching me important lessons about sacrifice and family loyalty, that someday I'll understand why they had to prioritize Stephanie's practical needs over my artistic ambitions. But what they don't see is that every time they choose her comfort over my dreams, they're telling me that my talent doesn't matter, that my years of dedication and practice and improvement are worth less than her temporary inconvenience, that the daughter they raised from birth will always come second to the daughter they rescued. I walk into the Juilliard audition room with hands that haven't touched my own piano in 3 days, and I try to explain to the panel that I've been practicing, but my timing is off. My muscle memory is confused by the different touch and response of their Steinway, and when I start Chopin's Ballade No. 1, my fingers stumble in the passage I've played perfectly 1,000 times, the passage that builds from gentle melody into thunderous climax, and I see the disappointment in the judges' faces as my dream crumbles in real time, note by broken note. The piano feels foreign under my hands, too responsive after years of fighting with community center instruments that required extra pressure, and I overcompensate, my forte sections becoming harsh and mechanical, my delicate passages lost in the unfamiliar acoustics of the room, and I know that I sound like exactly what I am, a talented amateur who hasn't had proper preparation time, someone who might have potential but clearly isn't ready for the rigorous demands of professional conservatory training. "Thank you, Miss Chen," the head judge says when I finish, her voice kind but final, and I know without hearing the rest of her words that I failed. That this opportunity I've dreamed about since I was 12 years old has slipped away because I couldn't adapt quickly enough to circumstances beyond my control, because I let my family's decisions derail the most important performance of my life, and I want to explain about the piano, about the timing, about how I can actually play this piece beautifully when I have the right instrument and enough practice time, but I can see in their faces that explanations don't matter, that excuses are exactly what they expect from someone who isn't truly serious about their craft. I call my parents from the subway station, my hands shaking as I dial, and when Mom answers, I can hear Stephanie laughing in the background, hear the sounds of a celebration dinner at some expensive restaurant, and I realize they're at Stephanie's graduation party, the party they planned for tonight because she finished her community college program with a 4 GPA, and when I tell Mom that the audition didn't go well, she makes a sympathetic noise, but then says, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry, but you know there will be other chances. And anyway, you put too much pressure on yourself with these big auditions. Maybe this is the universe telling you to consider more practical options." "Stephanie needs us right now, Melody," Dad says when he takes the phone, his voice warm with pride that was never quite that warm when he talked about my piano competitions or my academic achievements. "She's graduating valedictorian and she's so excited to start her new job tomorrow. This is her moment to shine, and you know how much this family celebration means to her? Especially after everything she's been through, so why don't you come meet us at the restaurant, and we'll celebrate together, both of our accomplished daughters." But I can't go to that restaurant and pretend to be happy for Stephanie when my entire future just collapsed because they prioritized her car over my audition preparation. I can't sit through dinner listening to toasts about her achievements when they've never once thrown me a party for my musical accomplishments, never once made my dreams feel as important as her practical needs. And I know that if I try to explain the connection between selling my piano and failing the audition, they'll tell me I'm making excuses, that other pianists practice on different instruments all the time, that if I were truly talented enough for Juilliard, I would have been able to adapt. The rain starts as I walk home from the subway, cold November rain that soaks through my good audition dress, the black dress I bought with money from teaching piano lessons to the neighbor kids, and I'm so lost in my grief and anger that I don't see the car running the red light until it's too late, until the headlights are filling my vision, and I have just enough time to think about how I'm 19 years old and I never got to prove my talent, never got to show the world what I could create with my music, never got to make my parents proud in the way that mattered most to me. My last thought before everything goes dark is that if I could do it over, if I could somehow get a second chance, I would never give them the opportunity to destroy my dreams again. I would protect my music and my instruments and my future with the same fierce determination that they protected Stephanie, and I would never again let anyone convince me that my aspirations were less important than their comfort, their guilt, their need to feel like they were saving someone who didn't want to be saved as much as she wanted to be chosen, to be loved more than the daughter who was already there. I open my eyes and I'm sitting at my old upright piano in our old house, the morning light streaming through windows that haven't been replaced yet, and my hands are small and my legs don't reach the pedals properly, and I realize with crystal clarity that I'm 12 years old again, and today is the day Stephanie comes to live with us. The day everything started going wrong, and this time I know exactly what's going to happen and I'm going to change everything. The first thing I notice is the silence in the house, the peaceful silence that comes from being the only child, from having parents who focus their attention and resources on just one daughter. And I want to memorize this feeling because I remember how quickly it disappears once Stephanie arrives with her sad story and her unconscious manipulations and her desperate need to be the most important person in every room. But this time, I'm not going to be the naive 12-year-old who gives up everything to make her feel welcome. This time, I'm going to be smart about protecting what matters most. I can hear Mom in the kitchen making her special pancakes, the ones with blueberries and lemon zest that she only makes for important occasions. And I know she's nervous about Stephanie's arrival, worried about whether we'll all get along, whether bringing a traumatized 17-year-old into our stable family dynamic will work out the way the social worker promised. And I remember how hard she tried to make everything perfect for Stephanie, how she rearranged our entire lives to accommodate someone who would never appreciate the sacrifices we made for her comfort. But this time I have 7 years of memories that haven't happened yet. 7 years of watching my parents choose Stephanie over me again and again. 7 years of learning exactly how her manipulations work, how she uses tears and helplessness and carefully timed emergencies to get whatever she wants. And I also have 7 years of musical knowledge that I shouldn't possess yet, advanced compositions and techniques that I can use to build my career before she has a chance to destroy it, and I'm going to use every single advantage I have to make sure that this time, my dreams come first. The first thing I do is call Alex next door. Alex Wright, who is 14 now, and whose father owns Wright Records, one of the most respected classical music labels on the East Coast. And when he answers the phone, I can hear the surprise in his voice, because we've been friends since we were little, but I've never called him this early in the morning, never sounded this determined, this focused. And I say, Alex, I know this sounds crazy, but I want to record some compositions, some pieces I've been working on, and I was wondering if you think your dad would listen to a demo? If you think there might be any chance he would be interested in working with someone my age? Melody? Alex says, and I can hear him sitting up in bed, can picture his dark hair messy from sleep, his green eyes wide with confusion and interest. You've been composing? I mean, I know you play beautifully, but I didn't know you were writing your own music. Why didn't you tell me about this before? And I realized that in my past life I never shared my compositions with anyone, never had the confidence to believe that what I created was worth hearing, always too focused on perfecting classical pieces to explore my own musical voice. But this time I'm going to be different. This time I'm going to take risks and build connections and use every resource available to me, starting with the boy next door, who has always believed in my talent even when I didn't believe in it myself. I've been afraid to share them, I tell him, which is true even though the compositions don't exist yet. But I think I'm ready now. I think it's time for me to be serious about my music in a way I haven't been before. And I know your dad understands classical music better than anyone, so if he thinks my work has potential, if he thinks it's worth developing, then maybe I can start building toward a real career instead of just playing for fun. Alex is quiet for a moment, and then he says, Melody, you know, I've always thought you were incredibly talented, like conservatory-level talented, and if you're ready to take that step, if you're ready to really go for it, then yes, I think Dad would be interested in hearing what you can do, especially if you're composing original pieces, because that's where the real opportunities are. That's how you build a lasting career in classical music. And I feel something settle in my chest, something that feels like hope mixed with determination, because this time I'm not going to wait for permission or approval or the perfect moment. This time I'm going to create my own opportunities and protect them fiercely. And when Stephanie arrives this afternoon with her tragic backstory and her immediate need for attention and resources, I'm going to be ready for her. I'm going to be so far ahead in building my musical independence that she won't be able to touch what matters most to me. I spend the morning at the piano, playing through pieces that I remember from my past life, letting my muscle memory guide my smaller hands through complex passages that I shouldn't be able to handle yet, and I can feel the music flowing through me in a way it never did when I was actually 12, when I was still learning basic technique and struggling with simple Bach inventions. And I know that this combination of adult musical understanding in a young body is going to be my secret weapon, the thing that sets me apart from other young pianists and makes industry professionals take notice of my potential. When the doorbell rings at 2 o'clock and I hear Mom rushing to answer it, I take a deep breath and prepare to meet Stephanie again, but this time as someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's capable of, and this time I'm going to be the one in control. When Stephanie arrives that afternoon with her 2 garbage bags and her practiced sad expression, I hug her warmly, but I don't offer to share my room. And when Mom suggests I give Stephanie half my piano practice time, I smile and say, "Of course, but I've been working on some compositions I'd like to record first, so I'll need a few weeks to finish those." And I see the flash of annoyance in Stephanie's eyes because she expected immediate access to everything that's mine, expected me to step aside gracefully the way I did in my past life, but this time I'm setting boundaries from the very beginning. "Compositions?" Dad says, looking up from the paperwork he's filling out for Stephanie's school enrollment, and I can see the mixture of surprise and pride in his expression because he's never heard me talk about writing my own music before, never knew I had ambitions beyond playing other people's pieces, and I realize that in my past life I never shared my dreams with my parents clearly enough, never made them understand how serious I was about building a professional career in music. I've been working on some pieces that blend classical structure with modern harmonies. I explain using language I learned from music theory classes I won't take for another 4 years. And Alex's father expressed interest in hearing them when they're ready, so I want to make sure I can give him polished recordings rather than rough practice sessions. Stephanie's eyes narrow slightly at the mention of Alex's father, and I can see her calculating, trying to figure out what connections I might have that she doesn't know about, what opportunities might slip away from her if she's not careful, and I know that in her mind she's already planning ways to insert herself into my musical pursuits, ways to make herself essential to any success I might achieve, but this time I'm not going to give her the chance. Over the next few weeks, I establish a routine that protects my practice time while appearing to accommodate Stephanie's needs, and I watch her try repeatedly to disrupt my schedule, to create emergencies that require my immediate attention, to make herself the center of every family conversation. But each time I respond with calm cooperation while quietly maintaining my boundaries, and I can see her frustration growing as her usual tactics fail to work the way they did in my past life. When she accidentally spills water on my sheet music, I smile and show her the photocopies I made, the digital files I scanned, the backup scores I keep in my room, and when she offers to help me practice by turning pages, I thank her but explain that I prefer to practice alone when I'm working on new compositions, that I need complete focus to capture the musical ideas that come to me during these sessions. I start teaching piano lessons to the neighbor children, charging $15 per half hour, and I open my own bank account with the money, something I never did in my past life because I was always focused on family harmony rather than financial independence. And when Mom asks why I need my own account, I explain that I want to start saving for college applications and audition fees, that I want to take responsibility for my own musical education rather than expecting them to pay for everything. The YouTube channel launches 3 weeks after Stephanie moves in, and Alex films my first video in his family's music room, a performance of my arrangement of Pachelbel's canon that incorporates jazz, harmonies, and complex rhythmic variations, and I can see in his face that he understands this is something special, that what I'm playing shouldn't be possible for someone my age, but he doesn't ask questions about where the ideas came from. He just focuses on capturing the performance in the best possible light. "This is incredible, Melody," he says as we review the footage, and there's something in his voice that wasn't there in my past life. A respect and admiration that goes beyond childhood friendship, and I realize that by sharing my true musical abilities with him, I'm building a different kind of relationship, one based on artistic collaboration rather than just proximity and shared history. When the video gets 500 views in the first week, Mom and Dad are impressed but not shocked. They assume it's mostly friends and family members being supportive. But when it hits 5,000 views the following week, they start to understand that something significant is happening, that people beyond our immediate circle are responding to my music, and for the first time I see them looking at me the way they look at Stephanie when she brings home good grades or compliments from her teachers. Stephanie tries to get involved by suggesting she could help with filming or social media promotion, but I thank her and explain that Alex and I have already developed a system that works well for us, that we want to keep the technical side simple so we can focus on the musical content, and I can see her realizing that there's an aspect of my life that she can't penetrate, can't control, can't use for her own benefit. The real breakthrough comes when Alex's father listens to my compositions and offers to set up a meeting with his head of artist development, a woman named Patricia Wong who specializes in nurturing young classical musicians, and when I walk into that meeting carrying recordings of 6 original pieces, I watch Patricia's expression change from polite interest to genuine excitement as she realizes that she's listening to something extraordinary, something that could develop into a significant career if handled properly. I've been in this business for 20 years, Patricia tells my parents during the follow-up meeting, and I can count on one hand the number of 12-year-olds I've met who have this level of compositional sophistication combined with technical ability. Melody has the potential for a major career if she continues developing at this pace, and we'd like to offer her a developmental contract that would give her access to professional recording facilities and promotion while allowing her to maintain her education and normal childhood activities. I watch my parents' faces as Patricia explains the terms of the contract, the small advance payment, the commitment to produce 2 albums over the next 3 years, the percentage of royalties that would go into a trust fund for my college education, and I can see them struggling to process the fact that their 12-year-old daughter is being offered a professional recording contract, that the music they thought was just a hobby has suddenly become a legitimate career opportunity. And in the background, I can see Stephanie trying to look happy for me, while her jaw clenches with barely controlled jealousy, and I know that this is the moment when everything changes, when I stop being the daughter who sacrifices for family harmony and start being the daughter who commands respect and protection, and I've never felt more powerful in my life. 2 years later, when I post my arrangement of Pachelbel's canon mixed with a modern electronic composition that Alex helped me produce, the video gets 0 views in the first week, and suddenly I have agents calling our house, and Mom and Dad are excited but confused because they hadn't realized the scope of my online presence, hadn't understood that my YouTube channel had grown to 0 subscribers, while they were focused on Stephanie's high school graduation plans, and Stephanie's face during dinner when the local news station calls for an interview is the first moment I taste real revenge. Local teen pianist goes viral with classical electronic fusion, reads the headline in the arts section of our newspaper. And there's a photo of me at the piano with Alex adjusting recording equipment in the background. And the article talks about my innovative approach to traditional compositions and my mature understanding of both classical and contemporary musical languages. And I watch Mom read it aloud at breakfast while Stephanie stares at her scrambled eggs with an expression that I remember from my past life, the look she got whenever attention focused on someone other than her. The interview request comes from Channel 7's Weekend Arts program, and when the reporter asks if she can film at our house, in the music room where I practice, I agree, but insist that Alex be included in the interview as my collaborator and producer, because I remember how in my past life I never shared credit, never acknowledged the people who helped me, always too focused on proving my own worth to recognize that success is collaborative, that building relationships is just as important as developing talent. So Melody, how did you develop this unique style of combining classical and electronic elements? The reporter asks, and I explain that I've always been interested in the mathematical relationships between different musical systems, that classical harmony and electronic sound design follow similar principles of tension and resolution, and I can see in her face that she wasn't expecting such a sophisticated answer from a 14-year-old, that the interview is going to be much more substantial than she originally planned. And Alex, how did you become involved in this project? She continues, and I watch him explain his background in music technology, his father's influence in the classical music industry, his own compositions that explore the intersection of acoustic and digital sound, and I realize that by including him in my success, I'm also elevating his career, that we're building something together that will benefit both of us in the long term. The interview airs on a Saturday morning, and by Sunday evening my YouTube channel has gained 0 new subscribers, and by the following Friday I have 3 different agents leaving voicemails, 2 requests for commissioned arrangements from local orchestras, and an invitation to perform at the regional Young Artists Showcase that usually only accepts conservatory students. And I'm finally starting to understand the power that comes from being recognized as exceptional rather than just talented. Stephanie's response is predictable but more intense than I expected, probably because this time I'm succeeding publicly, visibly, in a way that she can't minimize or redirect, and she starts making comments about how the music industry is full of people who exploit young artists, how I should be careful not to let success go to my head, how important it is to stay grounded and remember that family is more important than fame. And I can see my parents nodding along with her concerns, even as they're proud of my achievements. I just worry that Melody is growing up too fast, Stephanie says during one of these family conversations, her voice carefully modulated to sound caring rather than jealous. And I know how easy it is for teenagers to get caught up in the excitement of attention and forget about the things that really matter, like education and family relationships, and I would hate to see her make decisions now that she'll regret later. But this time I'm prepared for her manipulation tactics, and instead of getting defensive, I simply agree that balance is important and explain how the recording contract specifically protects my education, how Patricia Wong has insisted that my schoolwork must remain my top priority, how Alex's family has helped me understand the business side of music so that I can make informed decisions about my career, and I watch Stephanie's expression tighten as she realizes that her concern trolling isn't working the way it did in my past life. The breakthrough moment comes when I'm invited to perform my electronic classical fusion piece at the regional showcase, and the performance is so well received that I'm offered a spot in the summer program at Berklee College of Music, a 5-week intensive course in contemporary composition and performance that usually only accepts college-age students. And when my parents tell me they're proud but worried about sending me away for the summer, Stephanie immediately volunteers to come with me as a chaperone to help me stay organized and focused on my studies. "That's very thoughtful of you, Stephanie," I say, smiling at her with genuine warmth. "But the program actually provides supervised housing and structured activities for all the participants. And besides, I think this would be a good opportunity for me to develop some independence, to learn how to manage my time and responsibilities without family support, since that's something I'll need to do in college anyway." And I can see in her face the exact moment when she realizes that I'm not the same naive little sister who used to accept her guidance without question, that I've developed my own opinions and plans and support systems, and that her usual methods of insertion and control aren't going to work on me anymore. And the look of frustrated rage that flashes across her features before she catches herself and smiles again is worth every sacrifice I made in my past life to reach this moment. When I'm 16 and Stephanie comes crying to mom and dad about needing car insurance money after her accident that I now remember was her deliberately hitting a pole to create this crisis, and dad starts talking about selling my upright piano, I smile sweetly and say, "That's fine. I understand Stephanie's needs are more important. But I should mention that the Steinway Baby Grand arrives tomorrow," and the confusion on their faces when I explain that my YouTube success and recording royalties earned me enough to buy my own piano is almost worth the years of pain from my past life. "You bought a piano?" Mom says, her voice rising with surprise and something that might be concern. "Melody, that's a major purchase. You should have discussed this with us first. We could have helped you research different options, made sure you were getting the best value for your money." "I did research it thoroughly," I explain, pulling out the purchase contract and the bank statements that show 3 years of carefully saved earnings from my recording royalties, YouTube ad revenue, commissioned arrangements, and private lessons, and I worked with Patricia Wong and Alex's father to make sure I was making a sound investment. The piano is actually appreciating in value as well as serving my musical needs, so it's both practical and artistic. I watch Dad's face as he reviews the financial documents, see him calculating the numbers and realizing that I've been earning more money than he expected, that my music career has become a legitimate business rather than just a teenage hobby, and I can see the shift in his expression as he starts to understand that I'm not the child who needs their financial support and guidance anymore, that I've built my own income stream and made my own professional decisions. "This is very impressive, Melody," he says finally, and there's a note of respect in his voice that I've never heard before. "You've clearly been thinking about this seriously, and the fact that you were able to save this much money while keeping up with school and your other responsibilities shows a level of maturity that I didn't realize you had developed." Stephanie's face during this conversation is a mask of barely controlled fury, and I can see her scrambling to find a way to turn this situation to her advantage, to make my independence seem selfish or irresponsible. But she's caught off guard by how thoroughly I've planned this moment, how completely I've removed her ability to interfere with my musical equipment, and when she tries to suggest that having such an expensive instrument in the house might be a security risk, my parents actually defend my decision rather than supporting her concerns. "Stephanie, the piano is insured and the house already has a security system," Mom says, and I can hear the slight impatience in her voice. The first time I've ever heard her dismiss one of Stephanie's worries without lengthy discussion and accommodation. And honestly, if Melody has worked hard enough to afford something like this, I think we should be proud of her accomplishment rather than looking for problems. The Steinway arrives the next morning, a gorgeous black baby grand that fills our living room with presence and possibility. And when the delivery team finishes setting it up and tuning it, I sit down to play the opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece that I've been preparing for my next recording project, and the sound that fills our house is so rich and powerful that I see tears in Mom's eyes, and even Dad stops reading his newspaper to listen. "Oh, Melody," Mom whispers when I finish the opening section. "I had no idea. I knew you were talented, but this sounds like something you'd hear at Carnegie Hall. This sounds professional in a way that I never quite understood before." And I realize that this is the first time my parents have really heard me play, not background music while they're cooking dinner or distracted practice sessions while they're helping Stephanie with homework, but focused, intentional, listening to my actual musical abilities, and I can see them finally understanding why I've been so serious about my career plans, why the piano isn't just an expensive toy but an essential tool for my professional development. Stephanie tries several times over the following weeks to create situations that would require selling the piano, mysterious financial emergencies that never quite materialize into concrete problems, vague health scares that turn out to be nothing serious, dramatic relationship crises that resolve themselves without outside intervention, and each time I watch my parents become a little more skeptical of her timing, a little more aware of the pattern of emergencies that seem to coincide with my important musical milestones. The breaking point comes when she tries to convince them that my YouTube channel is attracting inappropriate attention from older men, that she's seen concerning comments that make her worry about my safety, and when Mom asks to see these comments, Stephanie can't produce any specific examples, can only offer vague warnings about the dangers of internet fame for young women, and I watch my parents exchange a look that tells me they're finally starting to see through her manipulations. "Stephanie, we appreciate that you're concerned about Melody's well-being," Dad says carefully. "But we've reviewed her social media presence with her managers and with the legal team at her record label, and they've assured us that appropriate safeguards are in place. So unless you have specific evidence of a problem, I think we can trust that she's handling her career responsibly." And I see Stephanie's face crumple with the realization that her usual tactics aren't working anymore, that my parents have started viewing me as a competent young adult rather than a child who needs their protection from my own ambitions, and that her position as the family member who needs the most support and accommodation is no longer secure. And the look of panic in her eyes tells me that she's finally starting to understand that she's going to have to find a new strategy if she wants to maintain her place at the center of our family dynamics. But by then it's too late, because I've already built my independence, already established my career, already created relationships and opportunities that exist completely outside of her influence. And when Alex takes my hand after my next recording session and tells me that he's been in love with me since we were children, I realize that I've found not just professional success, but personal happiness, and that everything I lost in my past life has been restored and improved beyond what I ever thought possible. Standing in the wings at Carnegie Hall before my debut performance, knowing that Stephanie's in the audience with my parents watching me live my dreams instead of having destroyed them, I feel the weight of every sacrifice I made in my past life transform into power, and when I walk out to that Steinway and begin my original concerto, Phoenix Rising, that tells the story of someone who lost everything and came back stronger, I'm not just playing for the audience but for every version of myself who never got this chance. The piece opens with a single melodic line, fragile and searching, representing the innocent dreams of childhood, and I can feel the audience leaning forward as they recognize something familiar in the melody, something that speaks to their own memories of wanting something beautiful and being told it was impossible. And as the orchestra joins in with gentle support, I'm building the foundation of hope that will carry the entire composition. But then the music shifts, becomes darker and more complex as the melody is challenged by harsh dissonances, interrupted by percussive strikes that represent the moments when dreams are broken, when families choose practical needs over artistic aspirations, when the people who should protect your gifts instead sacrifice them for someone else's comfort. And I can see in the audience's faces that they understand this is more than just abstract musical development, that they're hearing a story of real pain transformed into art. The middle section is pure conflict, the original melody struggling to survive against increasingly aggressive opposition, and my fingers fly across the keys as I channel every moment of frustration and loss from my past life, every time I had to practice on broken instruments, every time my parents chose Stephanie's immediate needs over my long-term dreams, every time I was told that my ambitions were selfish while someone else's desires were presented as family obligations, and the music becomes a battle between hope and despair, between individual talent and social expectation. And then, just when it seems like the melody will be overwhelmed completely, it returns transformed, stronger, and more complex than before, supported by the full power of the orchestra as it rises to a triumphant climax that represents not just personal victory but the vindication of everyone who ever refused to give up on their dreams, despite overwhelming opposition. And I can feel the audience responding with the kind of emotional intensity that happens when music connects with their deepest experiences of struggle and redemption. The final section is pure joy, the melody soaring over rich harmonies that incorporate elements of classical tradition and contemporary innovation, representing the synthesis of everything I've learned and everything I've become. And as I play the last notes, I know that I've created something that will outlast me, that will inspire other young artists to protect their dreams and fight for their futures, and that will serve as proof that sometimes second chances really do exist. The applause is thunderous, a standing ovation that goes on for 5 minutes, and I can see critics in the front row frantically taking notes. Can see industry executives already reaching for their phones to discuss recording and touring opportunities, can see my parents in their box seats crying with pride and amazement, and even Stephanie, despite everything, looks genuinely moved by what she's just witnessed. And I realize that this moment isn't just about personal victory, but about transcending the petty family dynamics that nearly destroyed me in my past life. The reviews the next morning are better than I dared hope for. A stunning debut that announces the arrival of a major new voice in contemporary classical music, writes the Times critic. And Phoenix Rising is both technically masterful and emotionally devastating, the work of a composer who understands that the greatest art comes from the transformation of personal pain into universal beauty, says the Washington Post. And suddenly I have interview requests from major magazines, invitations to perform with orchestras around the world, and offers from record labels that want to build entire promotional campaigns around my story. But the most satisfying moment comes 3 days later, when a young pianist emails me through my website to tell me that hearing Phoenix Rising convinced her to keep practicing despite her parents' pressure to focus on more practical subjects, that my story gave her hope that artistic dreams are worth fighting for even when family support isn't available, and that she's started teaching piano lessons to save money for her own instrument, and I realized that my revenge has become something larger than personal satisfaction, that it's become a way to help other young artists avoid the mistakes I made in my past life. The documentary crew arrives 2 weeks later to begin filming Second Movement, the Melody Chen story, and as I watch them set up cameras in the music room where I first learned to play, I think about how different this timeline is from my past life, how strategic independence and careful relationship building created opportunities that pure talent alone could never have achieved, and how the girl who died believing she was worthless has become a woman who knows exactly what she's worth and isn't afraid to demand it. 2 years later, I'm performing my second concerto premiere in Vienna when I see Alex in the wings with a ring box, and I realize that while I was building my career and proving my worth to the world, he was building a life that would support and celebrate my dreams. And when he proposes on stage after my performance with the Vienna Philharmonic, saying, "I want to spend my life creating music with the most talented person I've ever known," I finally understand what it means to be chosen and valued by someone who has loved me since before I knew how to love myself. "Melody Chen," he says as he drops to one knee in front of 3,000 people and an international television audience, "you've been my best friend, my artistic collaborator, and the love of my life since we were children, and I can't imagine a future that doesn't include making music together, building a life together, and supporting each other's dreams in the way that great partnerships are supposed to work." The ring is perfect, a simple platinum band with a small diamond that catches the stage lights without being ostentatious, the kind of elegant simplicity that shows he understands my aesthetic, my values, my preference for substance over flash, and when I say yes, the audience erupts in applause that feels different from performance applause, warmer and more personal, as if 3,000 strangers are celebrating our happiness along with our professional success. The proposal video goes viral within hours, not because it's dramatic or unusual, but because it represents something people rarely see in celebrity culture. A genuine partnership between two artists who have grown up together, who have supported each other's careers without competition or jealousy, who have built their relationship on shared creative goals rather than just physical attraction or social convenience. And the comments section fills with messages from couples who say our story gives them hope that lasting love really exists. "I've been waiting for this moment since I was 14, Alex tells the reporter from Classical Music Today during our engagement interview. Not just the proposal, but the certainty that Melody and I were meant to create music together for the rest of our lives. She's not just the most talented pianist I know, she's also the most dedicated, the most hardworking, the most generous collaborator, and I feel incredibly lucky that she chose to build her career alongside mine. And I realized that this is what I was missing in my past life, this sense of being valued for who I actually am rather than who someone needed me to be, this experience of having someone fight for my dreams as fiercely as I fight for them myself, this partnership that makes both of us stronger rather than requiring one of us to sacrifice for the other's success. And I understand why I had to go through all that pain and loss to recognize what real love looks like when it finally appears." The wedding planning becomes a creative project in itself, with Alex composing a piece for string quartet that incorporates themes from my Phoenix Rising concerto, and me arranging traditional wedding music for piano and chamber ensemble, and both of us working with Patricia Wong to design a ceremony that reflects our artistic values while celebrating our commitment to supporting each other's individual and collaborative work for the next 50 years. My parents are involved in the planning, but not in control, offering suggestions that we consider carefully but don't automatically accept, asking thoughtful questions about our timeline and our plans but not demanding veto power over our decisions, and I can see that they've learned to respect my independence, to trust my judgment, to treat me as an adult who is capable of making life-changing decisions without their guidance or approval. Stephanie sends a congratulations card with a generic message about wishing us happiness, but she doesn't ask to be involved in the wedding party, doesn't volunteer to help with planning, doesn't try to insert herself into our celebration in any way, and I realize that she's finally accepted that she doesn't have a place at the center of my life anymore, that my most important relationships exist completely outside of her influence, and that her attempts to control and manipulate me have not only failed but have cost her the opportunity to have a genuine relationship with someone who might have been a real sister if she had chosen differently. The recording contract for our collaborative album comes through just before the wedding, a project that will feature my compositions arranged for piano and orchestra, with Alex conducting and producing, and several guest artists contributing string arrangements and electronic elements. And the advance payment is large enough that we can buy a house in the Connecticut countryside, a place with a dedicated music studio where we can work on individual and joint projects without disturbing neighbors or worrying about noise restrictions. And as I sign the contract, sitting in the same office where Patricia Wong first offered me a developmental deal when I was 12, I think about the girl who died in the rain believing that her dreams were impossible, believing that artistic ambition was selfish, believing that love meant endless sacrifice for people who would never appreciate what they were taking, and I feel grateful that she never got to see how much she was wrong about, how much beauty and success and genuine partnership were waiting for her if she had just been brave enough to protect what mattered most. At my engagement party 6 months later, Stephanie doesn't attend because she's been struggling to maintain jobs and relationships ever since people in town realized how she had manipulated our family dynamics, and my parents, who now understand the extent of what they put me through, spend the evening quietly watching me laugh with Alex and his family, finally seeing what genuine support and love looks like. And when Mom approaches me at the end of the night to apologize, I can honestly say I've forgiven them because their actions led me to find my real family. "Melody," Mom says as she helps me carry gifts to the car, her voice careful and somewhat formal. The way it gets when she's trying to say something important without making assumptions about how it will be received. "I want you to know that your father and I have been talking a lot lately about the choices we made when you were younger, about how we prioritized Stephanie's immediate needs over your long-term dreams. And we understand now that we were wrong, that we failed to protect the most important thing about you." I pause in loading the car to look at her face, and I can see genuine regret there, not just the surface-level sorry that comes when someone realizes they've been caught making a mistake, but the deep sadness that comes from understanding how much damage was done, how many opportunities were nearly lost, how close they came to destroying the most precious gift their biological daughter possessed. And I realized that this apology is something I needed to hear, even though I thought I had moved past caring about their approval. I know that we can't undo the times we sold your instruments, can't take back the moments when we chose her comfort over your dreams, can't restore the trust that we broke when we made you feel like your talent didn't matter as much as her emotional needs, she continues. And I can hear tears in her voice, even though she's not actually crying. But I want you to know that we see now what we were blind to then, that you were the one who needed our protection. You were the one whose future we should have been safeguarding, and we're so grateful that you were strong enough to succeed despite our failures, rather than because of our support. And I realize that this is the conversation I wanted to have with them in my past life, this acknowledgement that they made choices that hurt me, this recognition that my dreams were valid and important, this understanding that family loyalty shouldn't require one person to sacrifice everything for another person's comfort, and even though it's coming 7 years too late, it still means something to hear them say that they were wrong, that they see me clearly now, that they understand what they almost lost. Dad joins the conversation as we finish loading the car, and he looks older than I remember, more tired, as if the process of recognizing his mistakes has been exhausting in a way that simply making them never was. And when he speaks, his voice has the same careful formality as Mom's, the same recognition that he no longer has the right to assume my forgiveness or my continued presence in his life. Stephanie moved out last month, he tells me, and I can see that this is difficult for him to admit, not because he misses her, but because it represents the failure of their rescue fantasy, the collapse of their belief that love and sacrifice could transform a damaged person into a grateful family member. She's been having trouble keeping jobs, trouble maintaining relationships, and when we suggested that she might benefit from counseling, she accused us of choosing your side over hers, said that we had never really accepted her as our daughter, and moved in with some friends from her community college program. I nod, but don't offer comfort or advice, because I remember how in my past life I was always the one who had to make peace, who had to understand everyone's perspective, who had to minimize my own hurt feelings for the sake of family harmony. And this time, I'm going to let them sit with the natural consequences of their choices without rushing to make them feel better about the way things turned out. We know that we don't have the right to expect you to forgive us, Mom says finally. And we know that you've built a beautiful life without needing our approval or support. But we want you to know that we're proud of you, proud of the way you protected your dreams when we failed to protect them, proud of the way you turned your pain into something beautiful. And if you're willing to let us be part of your life going forward, we promise to do better, to support you in the way we should have from the beginning. And I look at these two people who raised me, who loved me imperfectly, who made terrible mistakes that nearly destroyed everything I cared about, but who also gave me the foundation that made my success possible. And I realize that forgiveness doesn't have to mean forgetting, that accepting their apology doesn't require me to pretend that their choices didn't hurt me, that I can love them while also maintaining the boundaries that protect my happiness and my marriage and my career. I forgive you, I tell them, and I mean it. Not because what they did was okay, but because holding on to anger takes energy that I'd rather spend on creating music and building my life with Alex. And I want you to be part of my future, but I need you to understand that things are different now, that I make my own decisions about my career and my relationships, and that I won't sacrifice my dreams or Alex's dreams for anyone's comfort ever again. They nod and promise to respect my independence, to celebrate my success without trying to control it, to treat Alex as family rather than as competition for my attention. And as we stand in the driveway saying goodnight, I feel something settle in my chest that I've never felt before, the peace that comes from being seen and valued for who I actually am, from having my boundaries respected, from knowing that I'm loved without conditions or expectations or hidden agendas. 5 years later, as I hold my Grammy for Best Classical Composition while Alex adjusts his own trophy for Best Classical Producer, I think about that girl who died in the rain believing she was worthless, and I'm grateful she never got to see what she could become, because this version of me earned every note of success by protecting what mattered most and never again letting anyone convince me that my dreams were less important than their comfort. The Grammy for Phoenix Rising Symphony sits on the piano in our home studio, next to Alex's award for producing the album, next to photos from our wedding and our honeymoon tour through European concert halls, next to the letter from Juilliard offering me a guest faculty position, next to the contract for my autobiography that will be published next year, and I realize that this room contains the entire story of my rebirth, my revenge, my triumph, and my transformation from victim to victor. And when young pianists email me asking for advice about protecting their dreams despite family pressure, I tell them what I learned in my 2 lives: that talent without boundaries is just a gift that others will exploit, that artistic ambition is not selfish but essential, that the people who truly love you will find ways to support your dreams rather than demanding that you sacrifice them, and that sometimes the greatest act of family loyalty is refusing to let anyone destroy what makes you unique. The piano under my fingers is the same Steinway I bought with my own money when I was 16, the instrument that Stephanie could never touch, that my parents could never sell, that became the foundation of everything I built in this second life. And as I play the opening notes of my newest composition, a piece about second chances and the courage to choose yourself, I know that every sacrifice I made in my past life was worth this moment, this music, this love, this life that I created by refusing to let anyone else write my story.